Welcome back to Something in the Wilderness, a podcast to discuss each of Andrew McMahon's songs. I've mentioned here before that the inspiration for which song I'm going to discuss on each episode comes from all kinds of places. I don't always specifically say why I picked a certain song when I have, but today the reason's pretty specific. If you haven't listened to the last episode, I'm Ready, where Marissa and I discuss a well-loved Jack's Mannequin tune, then I suggest you go back and listen to that one as soon as you can. Today I want to talk about a song I mentioned in the last episode, possibly the most unique song in Andrew's catalog to date. I know that's absolutely a matter of opinion, but if I look at every single song he's released so far, I don't think any other one sounds like this, and I can't name a song of his that's further from his, quote, typical sound. I admit, it was a bit jarring when I first heard it, and honestly, it still is to me today, and it makes me wonder what's in store for us on the next album. So let's get to it. When Andrew started releasing singles for the upcoming Zombies on Broadway album, I could immediately tell that this was going to be a different sound for him than what I was used to. At that point, I still associated the self-titled Wilderness album with more of a post-Jack's Mannequin sound, but this one was completely different. And to be honest, hearing the song I'm talking about today before the album release years ago did not make me excited for the new album. I was pretty sure I'd find something to like about it in the end, but I knew the song would be a bit of a reach for me to get into. It's just not generally the type of music I seek out. I'm more of a traditional instruments kind of rock fan. I've always appreciated Andrew's piano compositions and how they work with rock music. And admittedly, in the past decade, I've become a lot more open to pop music in general. In fact, I used to say, if it doesn't have a guitar in it, it's not for me. Now I admit, that's a pretty closed-minded way to approach new music, and I've since had to abandon that. But interestingly, it didn't occur to me until years later that Andrew's self-titled album, which I hold in high regard, was a step toward what we would later hear on Zombies on Broadway. And it hardly had any guitar in it, by the way. But the song I want to talk about today is Brooklyn, You're Killing Me. The band is Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness. It's track 2 on Zombies on Broadway, technically, but the intro to the whole album is track 1, which is just background noise from a subway station. So this is the first song on the album. Zombies on Broadway was released on February 10th, 2017. But the single was released on November 18th, 2016, about 3 months before Zombies on Broadway. This song was the second of 5 singles that was released before the album even came out. And this is a part of a trend that I don't really like. I don't like to hear half the songs before we get a full album release. I like to listen to all the songs as they were presented on the album, and I guess one could argue that I could just avoid the singles and wait for the full album to come out, but how can you really do that if it's an artist you really like? There is a lyric music video for this song, and I actually love the background visual for it. It's a silhouette of Andrew's head with views of New York City moving mostly really quickly while the lyrics display across the bottom. It's an excellent combination of visuals and lyrics that represent the spirit and the theme of the album. So I'll link it in the show notes, and I highly recommend you check it out, because for a lyric video, I'd say it's pretty cool. Andrew specifically chose New York City as the place to write and record Zombies on Broadway, but also it became the setting of many of the songs. The bulk of the album was recorded between May and September 2016. And did you know that Zombies on Broadway is also the title of a 1945 horror movie starring Bela Lugosi? I only learned this recently when I simply Googled the title with no other context. The plot of the movie on IMDb reads, 2 bumbling press agents must search for a zombie to fulfill a commitment to their ex-gangster's boss's new nightclub, or face the consequences. And that description leads me to believe the album by Andrew McMahon has nothing to do with that film. But oddly, the film is set on an island in the Caribbean, not in New York City. But back to the song. Andrew is taking the train into New York City daily from Bedford, New York, which is a little suburb outside the city. But he and his friends were staying out so late, sometimes until 4 a.m. so often, that he ended up getting burned out on this city. So he took a break and went back to LA for a time to work on the album. So this song was actually recorded at Studio America in Los Angeles, which is ironic. While it was conceived in New York, it actually wasn't recorded there. Other stories I've read point to the fact that Andrew stayed in Williamsburg, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn, for a time. I don't know if this was after he came back to New York or around the same time that he was staying in Bedford. The song includes vocals and piano by Andrew McMahon, background vocals by Tommy English and Josh Moran, and drums, bass, guitars, and programming, all by Tommy English. The track is also one of 2 tracks on the album produced by Tommy English, the other one being Island Radio, which if you've seen Andrew McMahon in concert anytime in the last few years, I'm sure you know the song. So this begs the question, is this an Andrew McMahon song, or is it a Tommy English song? I know the obvious answer is that it's a collaboration between the writers and the guy who played the rest of the instruments and also produced it, Tommy English. But I can't help but feel like this song's so far out of Andrew's element. I do wonder which parts he wrote besides the piano melody. But hey, since this was a collaboration between Andrew and Tommy, then I think we may be in for more of this sound on the new album, which is produced by, you guessed it, Tommy English, coming in spring 2023. So we'll see. According to Setlist FM, Brooklyn You're Killing Me has been played only 23 times ever in concert. And when you look at the dates, you can tell that it was kept tightly in the set lists within those first few months of the Zombies on Broadway tour. By the time I saw them in concert that summer of 2017, though, they weren't even playing it live anymore. And you know, I'm okay with that. And he played plenty of songs at Bunbury 2017 off of that album, which I did enjoy. In fact, that show is what made me appreciate the album more. Heck, maybe I would appreciate this song more if they would have played it live. I don't know. Now, the last time he's played the song was actually on the Rock Boat in 2019. So not the Rock Boat that I was on, but the prior one that Andrew was on. That's the only time they've played the song outside of the Zombies on Broadway tour. As far as I know, Andrew's never played this song as a piano-only version, but I'd be super interested to hear that. In fact, I might like the song better that way. I did a bunch of searches online, but I came up empty on that one. Co-written by Keith Jeffrey from Atlas Genius, according to Andrew, this song was written in a Southern California bungalow about how much Brooklyn was destroying their lives. I'll link that concert in the show notes. Keith Jeffrey actually joins them on stage in that performance. The main line of the song itself implies that there may have been a love-hate relationship with one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, where he says, "Brooklyn, my dear, you're killing me." Andrew talked about the inspiration for the Zombies album in an interview with The Observer back in April 2017, and I'll link that one in the show notes. He had this to say, "I know it sounds crazy, but I spent so many nights in festival tents listening to dance music, like FKA Twigs, Lido, Sylvan Esso, and Atlas Genius. So it was a lot of dancing. It reminded me of punk in the early 2000s. That's what these dance shows looked like. It's like when we all gathered in the 2000s and people were moshing and jumping to every song. That's still going on. It's just happening in dance tents at festivals, and I crave that energy." This track was mixed by Claudius Mittendorfer, who has mixed other rock-turned-pop artist albums such as Weezer's White Album and Panic at the Disco's Pray for the Wicked and Death of a Bachelor. And I bring up the mixer's name here only because some of the sound seems intentionally dirty here. I call it dirty, but you might call it something else. Maybe let's say distorted and lo-fi. But it's really distracting to me, as if whomever made that decision, whether it was Andrew or Tommy or Claudius the mixer or all of them, intentionally made it sound like you were listening to an old vinyl record or a monotape. And I think the majority of what I'm hearing is that EDM-like drum loop that carries throughout the entire song. But I also do think the vocals and piano have their own filter on them. And again, just making it such a different song than what I'm used to from Andrew. For all I know, you may like that, you may prefer that sound. I guess I'm a little lost on why Andrew's piano has to take a back seat to that overly aggressive drum loop, though. Even during what you might call the guitar solo after that second chorus, the guitar really feels secondary to the drum loop. I do have to admit, though, the chorus is super catchy, and it does make me want to sing along, especially during the bridge after the guitar solo, where he shout sings, "You're killing me." But my brain just doesn't know what to do during those verses. Even if I try to focus on the words, I can't quite take it all in, which makes me think, maybe that was the purpose of these verses. It's the chaos of Brooklyn, contained in a song. If you go to YouTube to watch this lyric video, which I'll link in the show notes, the very first comment I see from 5 years ago in the video says, "This chorus sounds so much like Chris Carrabba, and I love it." Also getting lots of I'm Ready vibes from the song. So, 2 coincidences in that 2-line review. The first is the Chris Carrabba reference, since there's no way this guy could have known 5 years ago that they were eventually going to tour together, right? I guess I can sort of hear the comparison a little bit, but I'm not all in on that one. Whether Andrew's talking low in the verses or singing high in the chorus, yeah, I guess it could be compared to Carrabba's voice. But the second coincidence is that on last week's episode, where I talked to Marissa about I'm Ready, I told her that Brooklyn You're Killing Me is the only other song in Andrew's entire catalog that I could come up with on the spot where he talks over the music. So I was glad to see at least one other person out there in internet land agree with me. If you can think of another song of Andrew's where he talks, or talk sings, as I'll call it, message me because now I'm really curious if there are others that I've missed. So let's move on to lyrics. All right, before today, I never knew this existed, but Andrew did a spoken word version of this song without music, read like a poem from a book at a show in Brooklyn a few years ago. He literally pulled out what looks to be a book of poetry or lyrics during the performance and just read them off to the crowd. I'm not sure if this was eventually followed up by him performing the song, but that's not included in the video. And by the way, rarely do I search videos on YouTube and come across someone's video that I actually know. But shout out to Jess from the Love for Leukemia team for the Dear Jack Foundation. She's the one that actually posted that video for us all back in 2018. I linked it in the show notes. Since I never attempt to sing Andrew's songs on the show, but I can talk, I'm now going to read the lyrics, hopefully in a similar way to how he sings them on the album recording. And I invite you at home to talk singing along with me. Okay, all right, just let me think. All right, just let me think. My heart is a troubled captain in poisoned television waters. I had this air-conditioned nightmare like that book you gave to me last summer that made me think that everything was so much worse than it really was. My heart is a troubled captain, but let's not get caught up on the weather. I could keep searching for the meaning, try to keep this all together. But you've got green eyes like the forest. I got lost on the way to some other life. My hand is a brain-dead magnet, so I keep waking up on fire beneath this low-rise second city that's turning good men into liars. And maybe I'm not all that good, but I was better in your West Coast bed. My hand is a brain-dead magnet, but let's not get caught up on connections. I could keep searching for a meaning, but I'm still looking for directions. I was baptized in your parents' pool in Southern California. Then I fled. You know that I love listening to lyrics and thinking about what they mean in my own life. But honestly, it's really hard for me to focus in on the lyrics when the song's playing. I'm not sure if it's his rapid-fire delivery or the drum loop that's getting in the way, but there's several lines that do pop out to me when I hear the song. And I tell you, I wouldn't have been able to recite 90% of those lyrics without them right in front of me. This is somehow a song where I don't pay attention to the lyrics as much. And you know what? Maybe that's by design. There are a few that jump out at me like I mentioned, though, so I'm going to read these here. The first part of the first line of the first verse, not even the full line. My heart is a troubled captain, but it's probably because it's repeated elsewhere in the verse. Then I pick back up somewhere in the middle of the second verse. My hand is a brain-dead magnet, but let's not get caught up on connections. Maybe it's that word brain-dead that actually jumps out at me, though. And then the way the second verse ends. I was baptized in your parents' pool in Southern California. I just think that's a unique line. And somehow I never even noticed that he was saying after that, and then I fled, before it kicks into that second chorus. But yeah, weirdly, those are the only lyrics in the verses that I usually notice when I'm listening to the song. As I read through the lyrics a few times in preparation for the episode, I did notice some lines that I really like, but somehow never consciously noticed. And they're definitely the most relatable lyrics for me. In the first verse, I could keep searching for the meaning, try to keep this all together. And then the same line in the second verse becomes, I could keep searching for a meaning, but I'm still looking for directions. Which is definitely my favorite line by far in the whole song. Even though I've never picked up on it until today. So from here on out, when I hear this song, those are the lyrics I'll be listening to specifically. But I think they really resonate with me right now. Just always searching for meaning in my life, yet just trying to get the basics of living down at the same time. Hopefully you know what I mean. But one final note about the lyrics. We've talked before on this show about themes throughout Andrew's lyrics across the entire catalog. And one of those themes is his use of color. The most recent time we mentioned this was in the Ohio episode this past spring. But in today's song, he says, you've got green eyes like the forest, which is another simile using color. And FYI, I had to ask my 11-year-old daughter whether that was considered a metaphor. So let this be your grammar lesson for today. She had to correct me that this was an example of a simile, because any comparison using like or as is considered a simile. But a metaphor is where you say that the thing you're describing is something else. For example, my heart is a troubled captain, or my hand is a brain-dead magnet. So there you go. Look at Andrew throwing out metaphors and similes in the same song. But it's been a while since I've been in school, so forgive me. But all this does sound a little familiar. So thank you to my 11-year-old for her help on that one. Some final thoughts here. I can only assume that these lyrics were written in a stream of consciousness style to figure out how they would flow in and out of each other over a beat. But like I said earlier, it's just not usually the style of music I listen to. You know I'm a ride or die Andrew fan, but if you couldn't tell already, this isn't one of my favorite songs of his. And I have no problem admitting it. There's a whole lot of songs of his that I love. Then there's some that I just like, and then there's some that I just don't get into as much. 2 years ago, my wife and I started a Couch to 5K program, and we literally went from never running before to running 5Ks a few times a week. And I just realized how much this sounds like a commercial right now, but bear with me. It's not. We still do run about once or twice a month just to keep at it. But when I agreed with her to start running a couple years ago, my one requirement was that we have to have music along with us for the run. So I curated this playlist of upbeat, up-tempo songs that would keep us moving. And I'm glad to say that Brooklyn You're Killing Me was one of the very first Andrew songs I thought to add to this mix. And it's been there ever since. It just goes to show that maybe there's a time and place for all different kinds of music. And hey, I found a place for this one in one of my playlists. So thanks again for listening here. I really enjoy it, and it's great to know that people like you are out there enjoying it too. Feel free to chat me on Instagram or shoot an email to somethinginthewilderness@gmail.com. I could keep searching for a meaning, but I'm still looking for directions.